In the heart of southern Africa is a land governed by a force more powerful than any other on the face of this great continent. For millions of years, it has controlled the destiny of this unique wilderness and shaped the lives of all its creatures. The power is the gift that the rivers bring to this parched land. It is the power of water. The country of Botswana in southern Africa is a land of great contrast. Today, it is largely covered by the wild open spaces of the Kalahari Desert. But 20,000 years ago, its northern reaches were inundated by a vast lake. Seismic movements diverted ancient waterways and began a drying period that spared only 2 river systems. The Okavango, which feeds the bountiful wetlands of the Okavango Delta, and further north, the Chobe. All along the Chobe River, the interface of land and water supports an amazing richness of life. Here, the Chobe meanders sluggishly across a flat floodplain, stretching on either side of the watercourse to a fringe of riverine forest. The wet season has just ended, and the water flowing downstream from distant catchment areas meets a current pushing up from the swollen Zambezi. Slowly, the river overflows onto the floodplain. During this time, the bountiful supply of water in the previously dry interior draws animals away from the Chobe along migratory routes, and the herds scatter to new feeding grounds. But many animals are bound to the river and can live nowhere else. This is the only place in southern Africa where the rare puku antelope is found. They live exclusively on the floodplain and nimbly use the islands and waterways to escape predators. Other species are temporarily anchored here by new babies. Impala give birth in the bush on the edge of the floodplain and keep watch over nursery groups of the new additions to the herd. Warthog families bring their tiny piglets out onto the fresh grass, but stick close to cover in case of danger. There is a plentiful milk supply for the youngsters, who will grow quickly over the next few months before the dry season. But most dependent on the river and its precious water are the resident herds of hippopotamus. The hippos use the waters of the wet season to gain access to new territories, and here they feed on the new growth of summer. This is also the time when most of the hippo babies are born. Hippo mothers are usually very cautious when caring for a new infant. So to see a week-old youngster out of the water in broad daylight is a rare treat. During his early months, the calf is kept close by his mother's side. The bond between mother and calf is very strong, and she will be careful to keep him out of harm's way while he is still vulnerable. Hippos tend to stay submerged for most of the day, usually getting active just before sunset. At nightfall, they leave the river to graze on the floodplains, staying active during the hours of darkness. After grazing through the cool of the night, they return to the water before dawn. Each herd is dominated by a large adult bull who keeps order in the group with constant threat displays. yawning to expose an arsenal of awesome tusks. As the little hippo grows older, he becomes more affectionate toward his mother by playing and nuzzling. He will need her protection now more than ever, especially if the herd bull begins to take an early interest in the female. Unfortunately for the youngster, the bull knows that the female will not mate with him while she still has a calf at her side. He will make it his sole purpose to get rid of this obstacle to his ardor. The anxious mother repels her suitor's initial advances, but he is relentless and soon manages to launch an attack on the terrified calf. Mother's intervention prevents the calf from being killed, but it is her last act in his defense. Severely wounded by a slashing bite from the bull, he is abandoned when she returns to the herd with her new mate. The fatally injured youngster does not last long on his own, but in the spare manner of nature, his body does not go to waste. These young lions have also recently been ejected from their family. In the learning phase of their independence, they are quick to scavenge a meal from the young hippo's carcass. The three brothers are the latest generation of lions to become independent from the group known as the River Pride, whose territory is centered at Serendella. This is a relatively lean time for the river lions, as the herds of big game are still widely dispersed, and the young males, with their lack of experience, must take advantage of any opportunity that presents itself. One night, we were lucky enough to witness a startling example of the river's powerful influence on the behavior of its subjects. The brothers had chased an adult roan antelope into the water, where it became entangled in weeds. In other parts of Africa, lions display a definite fear and hatred for water. But here, the lions show behavior that reveals their close ties to this river domain. They readily enter the water and swim. Fear of crocodiles usually keeps lions away from water during the day, but it is unheard of for them to go near the water at night, when these fearsome reptiles actively scavenge the shores. The river lions, however, show very little apprehension in going after their prize. They spend most of the night swimming to the carcass and feeding like a group of strange aquatic cats in the black waters. This remarkable spectacle eventually ends just before dawn, when the first bout of feeding is over. The last of the lions to leave the feast maneuvers the carcass into a channel and drags it to the shore. Once it is pulled out onto the bank, the brothers relax and wait for the sun to rise and restore them to their former glory. With every new dawn now, the days are getting drier, and a change is taking place in the rhythm of the land. The passing of the seasons and the ebb and flow of the water is echoed by a tidal movement in the animal populations of northern Botswana. The waters of the summer slowly recede, and the river shrinks from the floodplain into its original course. As the temporary pans of water in the interior dwindle, the river starts to exert its irresistible power. Inexorably, it begins to pull its dependents back from their long journeys. Animals arrive from all directions now to graze the new flush of grass on the exposed banks and to drink in the fresh, life-giving liquid that the river brings past Serondella every day. It is at this time that one of the greatest concentrations of large game species in Africa begins to build up, to overwinter on the banks of the Chobe. Resident herds of buffalo are swollen by animals moving into the area from the slowly desiccating desert sands between here and the Okavango. Many of the females are pregnant, and the early calves of the season are appearing among the herds. One particular family of elephants has recently arrived from the dry interior to the welcoming banks of the Chobe. As with most elephant kin groups, the family consists of an older female, her daughters, and their young offspring. At the river, there is an abundance of food and water to last the long dry season. The wise old matriarch of the family has chosen this place to give birth to the young bull calf who has been growing inside her for the last 2 years. The young calf has a lifetime of learning ahead of him, but for his first few years he will be carefully watched and protected by his mother and the other females in his family. It is not long before he is taken for the first time down to the banks of the river that will become such an integral part of his life. When he is introduced to the rest of the herd, the little calf finds himself among a bewildering number of giants. The drying pools on the floodplain supply an abundance of that most popular of elephant commodities: good, sticky mud. Adults use the mud with great expertise to cool themselves and to ward off the sun and biting insects. But the little bull finds that it takes some getting used to. Once they get the hang of it, however, baby elephants regard mud as strictly recreational. Just like his ancestors, who have used this river for centuries, the little elephant will grow up completely at home in the water. In fact, he will spend a lot of his time swimming simply to keep up. As they grow older, the elephants of the Chobe are naturally at home in the river, spending as much time in the water as they can. The young bulls especially appear to enjoy bathing for the sheer fun of it. At times, their behavior seems reminiscent of distant mammalian cousins in faraway waters. The constant supply of water that draws the elephants here is also attracting the attention of water birds, who have spent the wet season in the pans of the Kalahari. Thousands of open-billed storks arrive to feed on freshwater mussels stranded by the retreating water. As the flocks stream in, they pay no heed to everyday activities taking place on the banks. African jacanas harvest insects hatching from elephant dung on the water's edge. Spoonbills use their specially adapted, sensitive beaks to feel for snails and small crustaceans in the shallows. Large flocks of pelicans begin to arrive in graceful skeins, many having flown over 300 kilometers from drying salt pans in the desert. They form massive fishing rafts, taking advantage of concentrated fish populations along the channels. On the banks, other fishing birds patrol the waters. The tiny malachite kingfisher darts like a rare jewel among the reeds, while a pied kingfisher uses his masterful hovering skills to survey the shallows for prey. Success comes to a giant kingfisher who kills and softens his prey by beating it repeatedly before swallowing. The monarch of all fish-eating birds on the Chobe is the African fish eagle. The mating season is just beginning, and their beautiful ringing cries are the signature sound of all African waters. The mud pools of the floodplain are also yielding their crop of food to some strange-looking visitors. The hammerkop, or lightning bird, plays a very important part in African myth and legend, and is surrounded by an aura of mystery. The only mystery here, however, seems to be in how to swallow such a large meal, when the meal itself is intent on escape. To get this bigger beakful down, it must be made more pliable and constantly lubricated. This can be a long and complicated process. Soon these pools will be churned by thousands of hooves into thick, clinging mud as the numbers of buffalo in the area continue to climb. These are times that have been eagerly awaited by the top predators on this stretch of the Chobe, the river lions of Serondella. The Serondella pride are always in superb condition. They often carry the luxury of excess fat and are characterized by barrel-shaped bodies and immense strength. This condition is a result of their hunting method and the size of their prey. At this time of year, all they have to do is wait for prey to come to them at the river. And by far the most sought-after prey item is buffalo. If buffalo herds arrive during the day, they will often cross to islands where the grazing is good. This does not deter the lead female of the pride, who shows the same lack of concern for the water as her recently ejected young sons. As she swims after the buffalo, she encounters a crocodile, which is viewed with suspicion until it moves on. Her chances of a successful hunt on her own and in broad daylight are not very good. When buffalo become the lion's main target at this time of year, the prides will often try to meet up, taking advantage of numbers to tackle this dangerous prey. The three brothers move back into the area with a young female who has recently joined them and wait at a fallen tree in the maternal pride's territory. Amazingly, there is no aggression between the two estranged groups when they meet for the first time at the pride log. The combined strength of the two prides joining forces makes for an awesome combination, and they set off to lay an ambush at the water's edge. As the sun sets, most of the buffalo finish drinking and move away from the floodplains towards the relative safety of the riverine forest. Smaller herds linger in the cool water until it is almost dark. And always the last to leave are the large, old bachelor bulls. As the last buffalo step onto the bank, the lions move in, pulling down a huge bull. With this many lions involved in the kill, the bull has very little chance, but he still puts up a mighty struggle. The energy the lions expend in killing the buffalo is more than compensated for by the huge amount of meat they will have to feed on for the next few days. The lions kill many buffalo at this time of year and sometimes can't eat everything they catch. Vultures, as always, are quick to take advantage. Even though the lions are not able to force down another mouthful, they can't bear to see their hard-earned meal stolen by these hated scavengers. They take turns in chasing the squabbling birds, but as soon as their backs are turned, the vultures sneak back to their stolen meal. This brazen behavior is not tolerated for long before an example has to be made. The rest of the vultures must now resort to pirating scraps from a marabou stalk. While the younger lions in the pride can enjoy this temporary abundance and play with their food. Not long after this interaction, the pride splits again. There have recently been new additions to the Serondella pride, and the youngest female returns to the cubs she has left hidden under a log right at the water's edge. She needs to move the cubs closer to the core territory of the pride and begins to transport her brood. Unfortunately, not much planning has gone into the move, and only once she has a cub in her mouth does she think about where she is going. Through this indecision, the cubs dangle awkwardly from powerful jaws that were definitely not designed for comfort. There are other youngsters of various ages in this highly successful pride, all left hidden in safe places off the floodplain. At night time, when the pride moves down to the river, the new cubs have their first interaction with their older siblings. From this early age, the water's edge will become a familiar part of their lives. All the youngsters are learning as they grow. One of the year-old females is having a lesson in patience as she tries to break into the shell of a well-armored tortoise. The older cubs are spending more and more time at the river, where their curiosity is constantly stimulated by fascinating new neighbors, some of whom are a bit too large to be taken lightly. Another family in the area with new babies is the local baboon troop, who spend their nights high in the trees on the floodplain's edge. During the day, they too take advantage of the receding river to feed on newly exposed water plants. The succulent shoots are stripped of leaves and eaten in great quantity. This is the richest nutritional time of year for baboons and coincides with the birth of the troop's new generation. The mothers form nursing groups to care for their little ones, whose naughtiness is endured with great patience. Adolescent females are fascinated by the infants and hang around the mothers, hoping for a chance to babysit these living playthings. One of the new mothers spends most of the day sitting at a distance from the rest of the group, and as they move off, she reveals a tragic secret. Her newborn baby has fallen ill and died, but the strength of the maternal bond will not allow her to leave the body. It will be 2 full days before she can bring herself to abandon her baby. The young baboons in the troop are irrepressible, with boundless energy and an obvious sense of fun. One afternoon, however, on returning to camp, we found that the joke was on us. Young baboons have raised the pursuit of mischief to an art form, and we were only too happy to sit back and watch the destruction of our campsite. We were now well into the dry season, and once again the character of the river area was changing. The banks of the favorite drinking places where most of the herds gather are now denuded of vegetation. On the opposite bank, however, there is still good growth at this time of year, but the animals are kept away by pressure from another successful species that lives on the banks of the river. Man. Across the Chobe River is another country, where the animals are not protected by the Botswana national parks. Farmers run cattle here, and poachers and hunters are a constant threat to animals on the opposite bank. The elephants know this, and they know that the only safe way to visit the other shore is under cover of darkness. After sunset, herds quietly gather on the bank and slip across the river to the opposite shore. They feed through the relative safety of the night, cautiously returning before sunup gives away their presence. It is estimated that some 50,000 elephants utilize the Chobe River system, the greatest gathering of these beasts on the face of the earth. The result of pressure from man and from successive years of a natural drought cycle can be seen during the dry season, when it looks as though some horrendous natural disaster has befallen the area. Through all of this, the constant source of life here remains, as water still flows in the river. On the outskirts of the other major river system in this parched land, however, the dry season brings different challenges to survival. One such area is a place called Santawani, a wild paradise on the edge of the Moremi Game Reserve that was once an island in a world of water. The vegetation and inhabitants here are typical of a river system. Palm trees and tall reeds dominate the vegetation. River dwellers such as red lechwe still linger here, as do African fish eagles. But a shiver in the spine of the earth and successive years of low rainfall have deprived this area of its most vital resource, water. And the river is slowly dying. There is still hope that one day the river might flow again. But now, in the dry season, a few dwindling pools are the last refuge for river dwellers who have nowhere else to go. As the precious water drops inch by inch every day, the remaining hippos, unable to make it overland to permanent water, are forced to huddle together in the mud. They all need the pitiful remaining cover to protect their sensitive skins from the sun. Competition for the deeper holes is intense, and fights break out continuously. As soon as one challenger is repelled, there is always another to take his place. Monsters lurk here too. Moving among the river weed on the water surface are other denizens of the dying river. Crocodiles have been forced together here in great numbers. They coexist peacefully with the hippos, but are constantly alert to opportunities presented by the draw of the remaining water. Among the most fearsome of the world's predators, these ancient reptiles reap a grim harvest from the mudbanks, feeding communally on any captured prey. Unable to chew, the crocs bite deeply into the carcass and corkscrew their powerful bodies to rip off chunks of meat. Some of these monsters are impossibly huge, able to swallow half an animal in a single gulp. They lift their heads clear of the pool's surface when swallowing to prevent water from entering the expanding gullet. There is no hope of survival for any animal that stumbles into their domain. As the sun sucks more and more moisture from the land surrounding the pools, greater numbers of thirsty animals arrive daily to be closer to the precious water. This growing concentration forces many species into overcrowded conditions, and tension between these uneasy neighbors runs high. A savageness has taken over life on the banks, especially among the impala, whose normally peaceful coexistence has now become a bitter struggle between the males for dominance and resources. Constant battles are fought for drinking spots and the females they attract. But these are not the usual ritualized fights of rutting males. Broken horns bear testimony to the intensity of the battles, and hideous wounds reflect the anguish of the times. Death is sometimes a merciful release. The followers of death ply their trade here too, and one by one, vultures drop from the sky to finish off what nature started. All the activity around death in this place attracts others who watch the sky for just such signs. A pride of lions arrives, drawn by the descending aerial scavengers. This pool is in their territory, and they will stay here for the remainder of the dry season. The reed clumps around the pool are ideal ambush sites, and the uneven ground makes escape difficult. With so many weakened animals concentrated here, the lionesses spring constant attacks on the drinking herds. In the panic of the ambush, A young male impala has fled into the pool and quickly gets stuck in the black, clinging mud. Desperate attempts to pull free only exhaust him further. Energy is precious here and in short supply. It is not long before the lioness spots the unfortunate animal's predicament, and death is this drama's only conclusion. The lioness must be careful not to get bogged down herself when pulling the carcass from the mud. She has a better chance of getting out because of her large paws and heavily muscled legs, and soon drags the victim onto the bank. Caught in the middle of all this activity is one of the pool's permanent residents. A blacksmith plover has laid her eggs in a shallow scrape on the banks of the waterhole. The eggs are perfectly camouflaged to prevent detection by predators. But the pair has already lost one clutch to the growing numbers of careless feet and hooves. They angrily warn off anyone who ventures too close to the nest, bravely defending their precious but precariously situated treasure against intruders of all sizes. Elephants are able to cover greater distances without water than all the other animals, and so herds come and go, drinking their fill and moving on. But even they are stressed by the extreme conditions. When breeding herds first arrive in the area, they show great care on their approach to the water. And simmering anxiety often spills over into raw aggression. It may be that they sense death here. The bones of an old elephant bull who died at the pool during the dry season lie rotting in the sun. All the herds that pass by stop and gently inspect the remains. Some of the adults caress the skull and the bones with a reverence and tenderness that suggests a keen awareness of their own mortality. Elephants represent a grave danger to the survival of the pool. They can move on, and so do not worry about disturbing the precious surface water that gathers on the clinging mud. Every elephant that enters the water reduces the survival chances of the pool and its dependents. The pool is now surrounded by an expanse of churned, sticky mud, and the waters have become harder to reach. Visitors must wade in and constantly run the risk of getting bogged down. Almost every day now, animals get trapped while taking grave risks to rid themselves of their raging thirst. Sounds of distress quickly bring members of the pride running from their resting place in the reeds. This time, it is the young males who move in towards the mud's latest victim, a female impala. The harsh times are a boon for the big cats. These youngsters will soon find themselves out on their own and must stock up on strength while the pickings are good. This may be their last easy meal at the pools because, once again, the mood of the land is changing. At the Chobe River, 300 kilometers away, storms are beginning to build, and black clouds tower over the floodplains. It is not long before the clouds begin to release their precious cargo on a fast recovering land. This time is known as the season of Pula, the blessing of rain. These same storms bring the sweet smell of rain and the beginnings of hope to the last desperate survivors of the pools at Santawani. The cruel dry season is nearing its end, and the stifling summer air crackles with a promise of life. The distant storms draw nearer by the day, and an expectant land awaits the first showers to cool the earth. To bring life back to the river. To close the circle.